Today we're finishing up the last video. By the end of this video, you should be able to have your EOC review completely filled in, but specifically identifying significant individuals from the civil rights movement. You should be able to analyze their impact on today's culture and also differentiate or be able to tell the differences between violent and nonviolent protest. After that, we'll identify some significant individuals from the 70s, 80s, and in the modern era, and we'll look at their impact on our society. And then at the very end of your review, there's a war table, and some of the boxes are missing information. So we will stop and make sure that you have all the information to complete the war table before studying for the EOC. So let's start with your paper about civil rights. It looks like this, but your version won't have the people filled in. So the goal is to go ahead and write in their names, but it's also important that you understand their impact. Be sure you understand the difference between violent protest and nonviolent protest and be able to give examples of each. So starting on the left-hand side, under the SCLC, which is the organization you need to know, if you're unaware of what the SCLC is, you need to stop down and memorize it. So they're the ones who are responsible for the Montgomery bus boycott. And the two individuals that are most relevant to the SCLC is Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks. And both of their names are also included in this description, so that should have given it away a little bit. Moving down to the SNCC, there isn't an overarching individual that's significant with this organization, but it's included because it is a big organization you need to equate with the nonviolent movement and protests. Then we have the National Organization for Women, or NOW, which is still very politically active today. If you go to now.org, you can see some of the different petitions that they're signing and different activist programs that they're involved in. The individual that goes best with this is Betty Friedan. Remember that Betty Friedan was the individual who wrote The Feminine Mystique. The overall idea of the feminine mystique is that during this time period, women are being told that they should be satisfied with staying home and caring for their family and also making a family. However, Betty Friedan will say that it's okay to have a sort of emptiness with this ideal image of women, and that in fact it's actually appropriate to feel like there must be more out there for you. A lot of people during this time period really saw this as very radical. But when talking about feminism, it doesn't always have to be this radical overhaul. The idea behind feminist by a feminist activist group is back to equality, which is all that the civil rights movement was fighting for. But this equality is between men and women. Moving down to the Chicano movement. The three individuals that you need to know that go with the Chicano movement is Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and Dr. Hector Garcia. Dr. Hector Garcia, though, specifically worked to create the GI Forum for more equality with the GI Bill with Mexican Americans who fought in particular wars during the time period, specifically the Vietnam War. So that way they could get the same GI benefits as other veterans. Over here within the Chicano movement, it talks also about some court cases you're responsible for knowing, including Mendez versus Westminster, Brown v. Board of Education, and Hernandez v. Texas. Now, Brown v. Board of Education is not specifically part of the Chicano movement. It's just showing another example of fighting for equality during the time period. And then at the bottom, we have the core organization, the Congress of Racial Equality, also a nonviolent organization. They helped with freedom rides and the Freedom Summer. Eventually, the group would shift to Black nationalism and separatism, What that means is there's still a belief in equality. However, that equality comes with having two separate societies, one black and one white. They drew national attention with their lunch sit-ins, the March on Washington, and also a couple of their members of the core program were murdered by the KKK in 1964. There's actually a really good movie that was created called Mississippi Burning. So if you're interested, you can look into Netflix and watch that. But James Farmer is the individual that goes with CORE. Moving to the right side now, this is specifically all nonviolent. We're going to move on now to violent organizations. It didn't mean that they were violent all the time, but they also felt like violence was an appropriate reaction and could be used when necessary. So AIM, or the American Indian Movement, you don't have to know specific individuals with this one, but you should definitely know the organization. This is a violent organization that sought economic independence and also revitalization of traditional culture. This goes all the way back to when we talked about the Dawes Act and assimilation of American Indians. They wanted their culture, they wanted their heritage back. Some of the most famous protests were when they took over Alcatraz. If any of you have ever visited Alcatraz, you may have noticed some graffiti. Some graffiti would say things like Indian Territory when they took it over, and then also Wounded Knee, which became violent when they protested. Today they speak out against the NCAA's mascot names, most recently the Redskins, and then also the Cleveland Indians. Moving down to the Black Muslims, the individuals that you should definitely know that go with the Black Muslims include Elijah Muhammad, Wallace Fard, and Malcolm X. Violence was not the only answer. However, they did feel like violence was acceptable if necessary. And then the last one is the Black Panthers, or the Black Panther Party. They believed that the nonviolent campaign of Martin Luther King Jr. had failed. They preached for a revolutionary war with four main desires: equality in education, housing, employment, and civil rights. The two individuals you need to know that are the founders of the Black Panther Party is Bobby Seale and Huey Newton. This has most recently been in the news with Beyonce's Super Bowl halftime show, where herself and her dancers were dressed up as Black Panther political party members. The reason why it was so controversial is because they were a violent group during the time period, and they do believe that violence can, not always, but can be an answer for equality. So now take a moment. You can pause the video if you need to. I'll zoom out so you can see all of the names at once, but be sure that you go through and, yes, write the names in, but you should be able to identify who these people are by themselves and the organizations, what their overall purpose was. After you've paused the video and gone through and completed this civil rights section, we're going to move over into the significant individuals that you have from 70s, 80s, and into the modern era. So starting with EOC testable significant individuals, the first blank that you should have is Sonia Sotomayor. This was the first Hispanic female to the U.S. Supreme Court and was appointed by President Obama. You'll notice on the right-hand side, I also included a picture. So if on the EOC Star they have any sort of images or they have any political cartoons, you need to be aware not only what these people did, but what they look like. Sandra Day O'Connor is the first female Supreme Court justice, seen here. And Phyllis Schlafly is an outspoken critic meaning going against the ERA, or the Equal Rights Amendment. She's a conservative, you can see her here, and she did not believe in the Equal Rights Amendment, not because it would provide equality for women. She believes in equality for women, and that would make her a feminist, but rather she felt that having equality might lead to women being drafted. And she talks about how having the Equal Rights Amendment would take away a female's right to be protected by a man. And so that's Phyllis Schlafly, and that's how she was influential even today. The Equal Rights Amendment is a really powerful amendment because it's one of the closest to passing amendments, but it failed by only 3 states. So it would have drastically impacted our current culture and our future culture if it would have passed. Moving down, then you have President Obama, current and first African American president. One of the biggest, most substantial pieces of political litigation passed was the Universal Health Care Act. Bill Gates founded Microsoft in 1976. You'll see him here. He is one of the wealthiest people in the United States, but he's also known for his philanthropy, which means that he gives his money out, gives them to lots of different scholarship programs and organizations, but he's also been accused of monopolizing the industry. Billy Graham is a conservative Christian leader, an evangelist, and he also is known for advising presidents during the quote-unquote new right conservatism of the 1970s and 80s. His children are actually still active missionaries and evangelists today, very outspoken as well. After you've had the opportunity to write in the information about these individuals, and you'll notice they're in bold and they have their pictures off to the right if that helps you, then we're going to move on and complete our war table. So at the very end of your notes, you should have this table, and the words that are bolded and underlined are the ones that you need to write in. For the Spanish-American War, the allies, you need to write in Cuba, and the opponents should be Spain. Off to the side, there's a little riddle to help you remember the Spanish-American War. It started with the sinking of the USS Maine. So it says, with the Maine, we went to war with Spain in 1898. So say that a couple times, see if it'll help you remember the Spanish-American War. For World War I, all of this information is really important to look over. I also added Alvin York as an influential person. He was influential in the Battle of Argonne Forest. He was a celebrated soldier, and he was also known as being a pacifist. For World War II, here are the important dates to write in. You should know that December 7th, 1941 is the bombing of Pearl Harbor when the U.S. enters World War II. And then this is one of the highest tested areas of the star. Be sure that you know World War II, you know the causes, the consequences, the battles, and the people we went over in the last video. Also, I highlighted the Korean and Vietnam War because of how they're correlated. These are 2 wars that were fought during the Cold War, and both were fought over stopping communism. So down here I wrote all 3, including the Bay of Pigs, but that wasn't a war, these 2. But all 3 of these are about communism, the containment policy, and also the domino theory, all set aside to stop the spread of communism. So I'll zoom out so you can see all the information. But once you've completed this, you've completed, or you should be able to finish your entire EOC review. So great job, and good luck on the upcoming STAR exam, May 3rd.